Hey guys, welcome back to part two. Decided to try to go down here so I don't interfere too much with the PowerPoint, and maybe the next one I'll be in another spot. But anyway, we ended up last time talking about DNA. And remember, DNA stands for deoxyribose nucleic acid. It's a biomolecule, and it's made out of two long chains, and they call it a double helix. Basically, what it is it looks like a spiral staircase. Okay, and the ladder, if you want to call it that, it has four nitrogen bases, and they abbreviate them A, G, C, and T. A is adenine, G is guanine, C is cytosine, and T is thymine. And they pair together. Now, to make DNA, what you do is you take a sugar and you take a phosphate and you take one of these bases, and they kind of just float around. And then when it's time to make copies of the DNA, they all click together, kind of like those little toys you had when you're little that it click, 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 and you could put them all together. That's kind of what they do. So these are the building blocks of DNA, and they're called nucleotides. And you put millions of nucleotides together to get a strand of DNA. Okay, so here we go. Here's inside the cell, you have this DNA, and it's all these lovely colors, and it's kind of hard to see, but the yellow and the blue is the sides of your ladder. Okay, and that they're made out of, the yellow is phosphate and the blue is sugar. I think by looking at here, the DNA, the nitrogen bases, the A, the C, the T, the G, they always project inward, and they're always attached to the sugar, and the sugar's name is deoxyribose, so that's where part of the name comes from. But you can see we've got these, and the thing about them is, you see where A is here. If you look at T, another strand is going to be over here, and A and T always go together, and C and G always go together. Their ends only fit, and you're like, okay, so what's the big deal? Well, if this is a gene and this code here makes certain proteins, if you change one of those, you got a different protein. Well, so we got bazillions of proteins, who cares? Well, if this is the protein that makes insulin, guess what? Now you're diabetic. So you can't change any of these codes without having some sort of issue because of it. So DNA is this information builds you. It's the blueprint to build you, and it's the sequence of these little codes. They determine what protein you make. What protein determines whether you got blue eyes or you got brown eyes, whether you got proteins in your skin to help waterproof it. All those things, they're located in this little code. Okay, so genes control protein production. All right, what happens is, okay, let's say you got a cut. Now your body has to replace the skin cells, the muscle cells, whatever got destroyed or hurt in the cut. So it goes into the nucleus and says, hey, DNA, I need some information here. The DNA opens up, and what it does is RNA comes in and makes a copy of it. Okay, so the blueprint, the DNA never leaves the nucleus. All we can do is copy it, but we got to leave the original alone. Then the RNA makes a copy of it, and then it moves out of the nucleus out into the cytoplasm. And in the cytoplasm is where the protein is actually built. Okay, so RNA is kind of the go-between, and it's the one that does all the work. DNA is like the boss. It has the info, but the info never leaves the boss's domain, the nucleus. So you can make all the copies you want of it, but you can't actually take it. Okay, and so gene expression is the process of taking that information from the DNA and actually building something from it. Okay, here's an example. Like, you have a covering, a lens on your eye. There's cells that cover that. Okay, and they're made out of a protein called crystalline. Okay, so where do we get crystalline from? So if you look here, here's what it looks like, the gene. Okay, and this is the DNA all twisted up. Okay, so now your body says, hey, we need to, maybe this person got poked in the eye and there's a little scratch on that lens, and we got to do something. We got to fix that. So then it goes into the DNA, and the DNA straightens out now. It's not all twisty. And let's say this is the code, ACCAAACCGAGT. This is the code for building that protein. It's probably a lot longer than that, but we want to fit it all on one slide. Okay, so what happens is messenger RNA, okay, comes in and makes a copy of it. And messenger RNA is a little bit different than DNA. It has a different sugar. Instead of deoxyribose, it has ribose. And instead of two strands, it's only one. And then instead of A and T going together, A and U. Messenger or RNA doesn't have thymine, has uracil instead. But if you look, A, U, C, G, C, G, so they match up. They make a copy basically of the top part. The bottom part is going to be the same except for where there's T's, there's U's. Now it made its copy, so it moves out of the nucleus and it goes into the cytoplasm. And then what will happen is there's going to be an amino acid. And proteins are just a bunch of amino acids put together. The order determines what protein you have. Okay, so this amino acid is attracted to these three letters. So it comes and brings its amino acid. This amino acid is attracted to these three letters. So it brings in its amino acid and all the way down the line. And so the amino acids start stacking up according to the code. And then they join together. And this is your protein. And when it gets to the point where it's long enough or it has all the information, it'll break off. And now you have your crystalline so that you can repair your lens. And the protein, once it's made like this, it doesn't stay long. What it does is it coils all up. Because if it coils all up, then it's stronger, then it won't break apart. Okay, so that's how DNA, these little letters, actually produce a protein, and then that protein has different functions. And again, we'll talk way more about that later. Okay, so all your DNA, and again, you have 46 chromosomes, and each one of those chromosomes has DNA, so you have a lot of. That's called your genome. They actually mapped out the human genome. I don't know exactly when they finished it, but they had a bunch of scientists working on it. So they could figure out where all the information was about, there's the human genome, there's the monkey genome, there's the dandelion genome. It's all the genetic information. Okay, and they have mapped out the human genome, which is pretty cool. They know, like they can tell you on chromosome 15 is the gene for, hair color or something like that. They have all of it, and they also have the disorders mapped out as well. Okay, so genomics is the study of those genes within the species, and sometimes they compare them, and that's how they can tell that we're really closely related to chimpanzees, because our DNA is very similar. Okay, and then they also have studying the proteins made from those genes, proteomics, or they call it proteomes. So a genome produces proteomes, and again, proteins is the ultimate, making a protein is the ultimate goal of those genes. Okay. Okay, another theme is that we need energy. Okay, the ultimate source of energy for everything is the sun. Okay, the sun makes, plants, we eat plants, plants give us energy. We give off carbon dioxide, the plants take in the carbon dioxide, they give off oxygen. It goes on and on and on. But energy is transferred from one form to another. And when organisms use energy to perform work, they lose some of that. We eat our breakfast and we work it off. We work it off for movement, and then we produce heat. Okay, so we lose some of it to the surrounding. Energy, every time you transform energy, you lose some of it. Okay, so as a result, energy flows through the ecosystem, and usually it enters as either light or, this is the most common, is heat. Now, the energy that we have, we can't create it or destroy it. We just keep transforming it, and then we get to a form that we can't necessarily use. So it's still there. We're just, transforming it all the time. Okay. Here's an example again with plants. They need light energy. And again, the sun is the ultimate source for all of our energy. They take it in through a process of photosynthesis, and they make food for us, and they start chemically recycling it. Okay. They take up chemicals from the soil, from the air, they pass out. And again, a plant makes glucose and oxygen. And then we eat the plant and we go through respiration, which is just the opposite of photosynthesis. And we give off carbon dioxide and water, which the plant needs. So it's pretty neat how that cycle works. And we also have decomposers too. We need decomposers to help break down some of this stuff so that we can reuse the chemicals. They're not always tied up in when the plants die or stuff. We need something to break them down so we can reuse those chemicals that are in the plant. Okay, so from ecosystems to molecules, interactions are really important. Okay, we don't have isolated groups. We feel like that right now because we're pretty isolated with the COVID, right? But interactions between them ensure that all the parts work together. Okay, it's really important when you're looking at cells molecules of cells and how it goes into an ecosystem. You're like, what? At the larger level? Well, think of an ecosystem, everything an ecosystem. If you look out your window right now, I'm looking at trees, okay? And the trees need the soil, and the trees are giving off oxygen, and I'm breathing in the oxygen, and then I see birds, and what are they providing? I mean, there's these interactions between them. We don't have all the birds hanging out together with nothing, and all the trees hanging out, and we have all these interactions, and that's what we look at when we look at ecosystems, okay? So an ecosystem, each organism interacts with other ones, and they have like kind of a job to do, if you want to call it that. Now the interactions can be good or bad, okay? So I'm a bird and I'm hungry, and I start eating all the berries off the tree, and the tree was really kind of hoping those berries would attract insects to carry their seeds somewhere else so that more trees would grow. But now the bird is getting greedy and eating all the berries, so no seeds are getting carried off. So, you know, you've got the interaction of the bird not being so good, and if it would let the hummingbird or something else come, and not a hummingbird, but a honeybee, let them scatter their fruit so that they can grow other places. So you have bad things and good things that can happen, okay? They interact continuously with the physical factors. Physical factors would be the non-living things. Water, air, dirt. You think about all the stuff that humans add to the environment, buildings, roads, you know, all of those things have to be interacted, and they affect the environment, they affect living things, okay? And again, here's an example of interaction. We have a tree. It got sunlight, it's absorbing sunlight, and it's, you know, sucking in CO2, and it's giving off oxygen, okay? Now we got Mr. Elephant, and he comes along, all right? Now this tree is interacting with physical things, waters, minerals from the soil. Okay, when this tree loses leaves, they go down here and they decompose, and then they add more minerals to the soil, so they're helping the soil be more healthy. Now the animal comes and eats some of the leaves or the fruit or whatever, and then when it moves through their system and they get rid of that waste, okay, now you're returning minerals there. So the plant is providing food, and the elephant is providing carbon dioxide. So they're, you know, they're working together. So you've got, here's a physical, here's you know, a living thing. So when you're talking about a ecosystem, it's not just the living things, it's everything that's involved in the ecosystem. Okay. When we have interactions at the smallest level, when we're talking about within an organism, we have, I mean, if you take a living thing, that's an organism, and it's made out of, like if you're talking about people, we have organ systems. So we have the urinary system, the respiratory system, we have our integumentary system, we have all these systems, okay? And but then now you take that system, let's say we're talking the digestive system, it's made out of organs. We have the stomach, we have the small intestine, the large intestine, we have the liver, we have the pancreas, we have all these things that make up the organs. And now if you take an organ, we'll take the stomach. If you look at the stomach, it's made out of tissues. It has certain layers that do certain things. Some secrete hydrochloric acid so you can break your food down. Some provide blood to the stomach so it can work and do its job. You got all these things. Now we can take that tissue and we can break it down into cells. Okay, and then eventually we can take the cells and we can break them down into molecules. So if you want to go smallest to largest, you go molecules. A bunch of molecules working together make up a cell. A bunch of cells working together makes a tissue. A bunch of tissues working together makes an organ. A bunch of organs working together make an organ system, and a bunch of organ systems together make up an organism. Now, the more complicated the organism, the more organ systems you have, and so on. You might end right here if you're talking about an amoeba. Okay, they're just made up of one cell. Okay, so cells do coordinate their chemical path, and they use something called feedback. We're going to quit here because I'm fast approaching my 15 minutes. We'll talk about feedback in the next part of this chapter, okay? So right now we are just talking about the interactions between ecosystems, between organisms. And again, after you're done with this, there'll be a couple questions for you to do, and then you can move on to the next part. So I will chat with you later.